Attention, lovers of transformation and justice stories. Have you ever felt invisible? Like your own life fades, while others shine at your expense? If the answer is yes, then make sure to like this video now and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any unforgettable tales. Get ready, because what you are about to read will leave you breathless. The ghost reclaims her soul. She gave him 10 years of her life, her youth, her everything. In return, he made her invisible, a ghost in her own home, while parading his beautiful mistress Clara right under her nose. He thought she was weak, insignificant, and utterly dependent. But he was wrong. 5 years after her silent exit, she returned to his world, a goddess of success and beauty. He and his mistress looked at her without seeing her, dismissing the woman they had once destroyed. They didn't recognize the masterpiece born from their cruelty, not until it was far, far too late. This is the story of Anya's vengeance. Chapter 1. The Sound of Humiliation. The clink of ice in Julian's whiskey glass was the only punctuation in the suffocating silence of their penthouse in the exclusive Upper East Side of Manhattan. It was a sound Anya had come to associate with humiliation. It was the sound of another Tuesday evening, another night when her husband, Julian Sterling, a man whose name was synonymous with tech fortune and ruthless ambition, treated her like a piece of furniture he had forgotten he owned. Anya was sitting across from him on a cream-colored sofa that cost more than her parents' first car. She was reading a book, or pretending to. The words swam on the page, meaningless black scrawls against a white background. Her attention was entirely on him, on the tense line of his jaw as he scrolled through his phone, a slight, cruel smile teasing his lips. She knew who he was texting: Clara Vance. The name was a bitter poison on her tongue, even when unspoken. Clara was everything Anya was not. She was vibrant, with a laugh that demanded attention, and a body sculpted by expensive trainers and a strict dietitian's regimen. She was an image consultant, a vague, glamorous title that seemed to involve attending endless parties and being photographed on Julian's arm. Their affair was not a secret. It was a public spectacle. Julian had paraded Clara at charity galas, product launches, even a family Christmas Eve dinner, where Anya's own mother had to pretend not to see the possessive hand Clara placed on Julian's back. "Did you need something?" Julian's voice cut the silence. He hadn't looked up from his phone. Anya's heart gave its familiar, painful thud. It was the question of a man annoyed by a persistent fly. She lowered her book. "I was just wondering if you'd thought more about the Children's Hospital fundraiser I'm helping to organize. We need to finalize the corporate sponsorship list by Friday." He finally looked up, and the gaze in his eyes was one of pure immaculate boredom. It was a look that said, "You and your little hobbies. Send the list to my assistant, Maria. She'll handle it." He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, his attention already returned to the glowing screen. The faint smile returned. A new message from Clara, no doubt. Anya felt a familiar cold wave wash over her. It was no longer anger. The anger had burned out long ago, leaving only the gray ash of resignation. She had been Anya Hayes, an art history graduate with bright eyes and a passion for restoration, when she met Julian. He had been charming, a whirlwind of confidence and power that had captivated her. He had loved her quiet nature, saying it was a balm to his chaotic life. 10 years of marriage had revealed the truth. He didn't love her quiet nature. He loved her silence. He loved that she didn't challenge him, that she managed their home with quiet efficiency, that she was a presentable, if unremarkable, backdrop to his dazzling life. She had slowly faded until she felt like a watercolor left out in the rain. Her clothes were tasteful but bland, chosen not to draw attention. Her hair was always pulled back into a neat, simple bun. She hadn't bought a new tube of lipstick in 3 years. Why bother? The only person she wanted to see her didn't even look her way. The real breaking point had come 6 months earlier. It was their 10th anniversary. Anya had spent weeks planning a surprise. She had booked a private chef, filled the apartment with her favorite flowers, peonies, and was wearing the blue dress he had once said made her eyes look like the ocean. He came home late, smelling of expensive perfume, Clara's signature scent, a sickly sweet gardenia that churned Anya's stomach. He didn't notice the flowers, the chef, or the dress. He walked straight to the bedroom, pulling off his tie. "Busy day," he had grunted, not as an apology, but as a statement of fact. "I'm exhausted. Think I'll turn in early." "Julian," she had whispered, her voice trembling. "It's our anniversary." He stopped, his back to her. She watched his shoulders rise and fall in a sigh of pure exasperation. "Anna, for God's sake, it's just a day. We've been married 10 years. What's the big deal?" He had turned then, and his eyes, cold and hard, finally met hers. "Don't be so needy. It's unbecoming." The word hit her like a physical blow. Needy. She who asked for nothing. She who swallowed his blatant infidelity with a painful smile. She who managed his life from the shadows so he could shine in the spotlight. That night, something inside her fractured. The hope she had clung to, the foolish belief that the old Julian was still in there somewhere, finally died. Now, watching him text his mistress in the home she had so meticulously cared for them, the fracture became a clean break. She stood up. The movement was so sudden it startled him. He looked up, a flash of irritation in his eyes. "Now what?" "I'm going to my sister's place for a few days." Her voice was surprisingly steady. The decision, once made, felt less like a leap and more like a simple step onto solid ground. Julian shrugged, his thumb already scrolling the screen. "Fine. The sheets in the guest room are clean." He assumed, as he always did, that her life, her plans, her entire existence revolved around his. He didn't ask why. He didn't care. Anya walked into their cavernous bedroom. The closet was the size of a small boutique. On one side hung Julian's bespoke suits and designer shirts. On the other, her own wardrobe of beige, gray, and navy. She packed one small suitcase, not with the muted colors of her current life, but with the few remnants of the woman she used to be. A pair of worn jeans, a soft, paint-stained t-shirt, her old art supplies. She took her passport, her personal bank card, with the meager savings she had squirreled away from the household budget, and the small, tarnished silver locket her grandmother had given her. As she passed through the living room, Julian was still on the sofa, bathed in the blue light of his phone. He did not look up. He did not say goodbye. She closed the heavy oak door of the penthouse behind her, the soft click echoing the final, silent closing of a chapter of her life. The doorman, a kind man named Jorge, tipped his hat. "Have a good evening, Mrs. Sterling." "You too, Jorge," she said, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time in months. Outside, the city air was cool and crisp. Anya did not go to her sister's place. She walked to the nearest ATM, withdrew all her savings, and hailed a cab. "Penn Station, please," she said, her voice clear and strong. As the cab pulled away from the curb, she took one last look at the glittering tower where she had lost herself. Julian wouldn't even notice she was gone. Not really. Not until his shirts weren't perfectly pressed, or he ran out of his favorite brand of coffee. And by then, she would be long gone. She was no longer Mrs. Sterling. She was just Anya. And for the first time in a decade, that felt like enough. The ghost was leaving the building, and she wasn't looking back. Do you think Julian noticed her absence quickly? Or did his ego completely blind him? Drop your comments below and share your predictions. Chapter 2. The Chrysalis Breaks. The first year was the hardest. Anya did not vanish into a glamorous new life overnight. She fled to a place Julian would never think to look. A small, humble town in the Adirondacks, a place of brick homes and forgotten workshops. It was the village her grandmother had emigrated from, a place Anya had only visited once as a child, but whose memory of honest, hard-working people felt like a safe harbor. She rented a small, third-floor apartment with no elevator that smelled of dust and old wood. For the first few weeks, she did little more than sleep. The exhaustion of a decade of silent suffering was a physical weight, and she gave in to it. There were no schedules to keep, no dinners to plan, no passive-aggressive comments to deflect. The silence that had once been her prison was now her sanctuary. Her savings, which had seemed substantial when she withdrew them, dwindled at an alarming rate. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. She was 34, with a 10-year gap in her resume, and a degree that felt utterly useless in this new, pragmatic world. One rainy afternoon, looking at herself in the warped bathroom mirror, she finally faced the woman she had become. Her face was pale and puffy, her eyes dull, her hair limp and lifeless. She was the embodiment of neglect. That was the day the chrysalis began to form. It didn't start with a makeover, but with a decision. She would not let Julian Sterling be the author of the final chapter of her life. Her first step was small. She found work as a waitress in a local cafe, a bustling place called The Hearth. The job was exhausting. Her feet ached. Her hands were raw from hot dishes and harsh detergents, and the pay barely covered rent and food. But for the first time in years, she felt useful. People looked at her, truly looked at her. They smiled. They thanked her. They told her to have a good day. She was no longer invisible. She was Elena, the quiet waitress who always remembered who took their coffee black. The physical labor began to change her. The puffiness in her face receded, replaced by the definition of her cheekbones. The constant movement toned her body in a way no expensive, unused gym membership ever had. She started walking everywhere, exploring her new town on foot, feeling strength return to her legs. With her first few paychecks, she didn't buy designer clothes. She bought art supplies, canvases, oils, brushes. In the evenings, after her shifts, she climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her small apartment. She put on music and she painted. At first, her canvases were filled with dark, tumultuous swirls of gray and black. It was the pain, the anger, the humiliation, all of it pouring out of her onto the canvas. It was a messy, painful, but necessary exorcism. Slowly, color began to seep back in. She started painting the town she was discovering. The intricate patterns of rust on an old fire escape, the vibrant graffiti on a forgotten brick wall, the way the morning light struck the stained glass of a derelict church. She was rediscovering her passion, the very thing Julian had once dismissed as a nice little hobby. A regular customer at the cafe, an older gentleman named Mr. Hernandez, who owned a small antique shop, noticed her paint-stained fingers. He asked to see her work. Hesitantly, Anya invited him to her apartment one afternoon. He stood for a long time in her small living room, which was now more studio than home, his gaze moving from canvas to canvas. "My dear," he finally said, his voice heavy with emotion, "you do not see rust and decay. You see stories. You see beauty." The following week, Mr. Hernandez cleared his shop window and displayed 3 of Anya's paintings. He placed a simple, handwritten card beside them. Local Scenes by Elena G. 2 of them sold within 3 days. The money was more than she made in 2 weeks at the cafe, but it was the validation that truly mattered. Someone saw value in her vision. This small success was the catalyst. Anya, now Elena, signed up for a business course at the local community college. She learned about marketing, about pricing, about building a brand. She opened an Instagram account, posting high-quality photos of her work. She began attending local art fairs, not as a visitor, but as a vendor. Her style was unique. She combined her classical background in art history with the raw, industrial aesthetic of her surroundings. She developed a technique of incorporating found objects, scraps of metal, old gears, broken fragments of glass, into her paintings, giving them a rich, textured, and three-dimensional quality. Her work was a conversation between the past and the my present, between decay and rebirth. It was the story of her own transformation told in oil and rust. As her art business grew, so did her confidence. She cut her hair into a sharp, elegant bob that framed her face. She began dressing in a way that reflected her artistic sensibilities, bold colors, interesting textures, and unique handmade jewelry. She learned to love her own company, but she also built a new community. She made friends with other artists, with the gruff but kind cafe owner, with the quiet librarian who recommended books. She also started therapy. Unpacking a decade of emotional abuse was painful. She mourned the woman she had been, the years she had lost. But her therapist helped her understand that her softness was not a weakness, and that her desire for a loving relationship was not neediness. She learned to set boundaries, to value her own opinion, and to say no. By the end of the 5th year, the woman who had fled Julian Sterling's penthouse was gone. In her place was Anya Hayes, a name that was beginning to generate serious buzz in the national art scene. She now owned her own gallery, a beautiful space in a renovated warehouse downtown. Her work was sought after by collectors and corporate clients. She was financially independent, emotionally resilient, and radiantly self-assured. What do you think was the most critical lesson Anya learned during these 5 years of transformation? Financial independence, emotional healing, or rediscovery of her passion? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 3. The Gala of Starlight. One morning, she was at her gallery overseeing the installation of a new exhibition when her assistant, a young, enthusiastic art student named Ben, handed her a glossy magazine. "You're not going to believe this," he said, eyes wide. Page 72. Anya took the magazine. It was a high society publication, the kind she used to find on the coffee table in her old life. And there, on page 72, was a double-page spread about the upcoming Starlight Gala, the biggest charity event of the year in her former city. The event chairman was listed as Julian Sterling, and on his arm, in the accompanying photo, smiling brilliantly, was Clara Vance, now listed as Clara Sterling. They had married. A younger Anya would have felt a pang of pain, a bitter twist of jealousy. But looking at the photo now, she felt nothing. A strange, clinical detachment. They looked like two strangers in a frozen photograph, caught in a world that no longer had anything to do with her. Ben pointed to the list of top sponsors. "Look," his finger tapped the page. "The Sterling Foundation is the main sponsor, of course, but look at the corporate art partner." Anya's eyes followed his finger, and there, in elegant script, was the firm's name. Hayes Studios. Her studio. The Starlight Gala, the pinnacle of the world she had fled, wanted her, or rather, her work, as its central artistic attraction. The irony was so thick, so potent, it was almost comical. Ben looked at her, expecting a reaction. He didn't know her history. To him, it was just a massive professional opportunity. A slow smile spread across Anya's face. It was a real, confident, genuine smile. The chrysalis hadn't just broken, It had shattered, revealing something stronger and more beautiful than she had ever imagined. "Ben," her voice was quiet and clear. "Call them. Tell them we accept. And book me a ticket. It's time for me to pay a visit." Chapter 4. The Showdown. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a galaxy of manufactured stars. Crystals dripped from the chandeliers like frozen rain, casting fragmented light over a sea of couture gowns and bespoke tuxedos. The air hummed with the select murmur of old and new money, a symphony of clinking champagne glasses, discreet laughter, and the incessant networking of the city's elite. This was the Starlight Gala, Julian Sterling's annual monument to his own philanthropy and power. In the center of the room, cordoned off by velvet ropes, stood the night's central artistic piece. It was a sculpture, but that word felt too small, too static. It was an installation, a living work of art titled Echoes of Rebirth. 3 enormous translucent panels, each over 10 feet high, were arranged in a gentle curve. Embedded in the polished resin were the ghosts of industrial decay, rusted gears that seemed to float in midair, delicate oxidized copper lattices, and fragments of broken, iridescent glass. Yet woven through this metallic skeleton were veins of pure, vibrant color, streaks of sapphire blue, emerald green, and a defiant, burning crimson. Hidden lights pulsed from within, causing the colors to shift and glow, making the rusted metal appear to breathe. It was breathtaking, a powerful statement about the beauty that could be forged from ruin. The artist, according to the program, was a rising star named Anya Hayes, a name that meant nothing to Julian Sterling. He had barely glanced at the proposal, delegating the artistic things to the event committee. His attention was on the real prize, the multi-million-dollar donations he would extract from the city's wealthiest patrons before the night was over. He stood by the entrance, a king surveying his court. Beside him, Clara Sterling glittered in a silver gown that clung to her like a second skin. Her blonde hair was swept up in an intricate updo that must have taken hours. And the diamond necklace at her throat, Julian's latest "I love you," was dazzling. She was the perfect accessory, the beautiful, polished wife of a millionaire. "Honey, you've outdone yourself," she murmured, squeezing his arm. "Everyone who is anyone is here." "Of course they are," Julian said. His eyes scanned the crowd, calculating net worths. "It's the only ticket that matters." He was in his element, powerful, admired, and in control. The ghost of his first wife, the plain, mousy woman whose name he hadn't spoken in 5 years, was a distant, faded memory. He had heard she had moved somewhere dreary and insignificant. He had paid an insignificant sum, as stipulated in their prenup, and let his lawyers handle the divorce. It was a clean, efficient amputation of a part of his life that no longer served him. It was then that she walked in. He didn't notice her at first. His attention was caught by the collective ripple that ran through the room, the subtle turning of heads, the sudden pause in conversations. It was the kind of entrance that usually announced the arrival of a movie star or foreign royalty. His eyes followed the crowd's gaze toward the grand archway. The woman who stood there was not a movie star. He would have known her. This woman was different. She wore a simple, full-length emerald green silk dress. It was a bold, striking color, but the cut was exquisitely understated. It did not cling or glitter. It flowed. Her hair was a sharp, dark bob that gleamed under the chandeliers, framing a face that was both elegant and captivating. High cheekbones, a strong jawline, and eyes that seemed to possess a quiet, knowing power. A single, magnificent piece of jewelry, a handmade silver pendant reminiscent of the sculpture in the center of the room, rested on her collarbone. She wasn't conventionally beautiful like Clara. She was something more compelling. She was art. "Who is that?" Clara whispered, a rare note of insecurity in her voice. She felt a primal, feminine threat. This woman was not playing the same game as her. She operated on an entirely different plane. Julian grunted, his eyes narrowed. "I don't know. Probably some artist. The one who made the sculpture, I imagine." He dismissed her with the same casual arrogance he applied to anyone he deemed unimportant. She was staff, essentially. The woman began to move through the room. She did not rush the crowd or seek anyone out. She simply walked. Her posture perfect, her gaze forward, a small, serene smile on her lips. People parted for her, their eyes following her. She was heading toward the sculpture. Her path would lead her directly past Julian and Clara. As she drew closer, Julian got a better look at her face. There was something, a flicker of something familiar in the curve of her smile, in the shape of her eyes. It was like hearing a half-forgotten melody, a ghost of a memory he couldn't place. He dismissed it. A trick of the light. She was now only a few feet away. The event photographer, sensing the moment, raised his camera. The gala chairman and his beautiful wife, and the mysterious artist. Clara, always conscious of appearances, summoned a bright smile. Julian adopted a look of magnanimous patronage. This woman, after all, was contributing to his event. The artist, Anya Hayes, paused as she reached them. Her cold, impersonal gaze swept over Clara's glittering dress. Then Julian's perfectly tailored tuxedo. For a split second, her eyes met Julian's, and in that moment, he felt nothing. No recognition, no spark of memory. He was looking at a complete stranger, a slightly interesting, but ultimately irrelevant stranger. "A wonderful piece," Julian said, his voice ringing with fake sincerity. He vaguely gestured toward the sculpture. "A real conversation starter. Well done." It was the kind of praise given to a caterer for a well-arranged canapé. The woman's smile did not waver. It was polite, distant, and utterly unreadable. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice was low and soft, with a timbre that was somehow both sweet and unyielding. "I am so glad it is to your liking." She then directed her gaze to Clara. "Mrs. Sterling," she said to with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "That is a lovely necklace," Clara preened, touching the diamonds at her throat. "Thank you. Julian has impeccable taste." The artist's smile widened slightly, a subtle shift at the corner of her lips that did not reach her eyes. "He certainly does," she agreed softly, and then she was gone. She simply continued her serene path toward her sculpture, leaving Julian and Clara standing in her wake. The moment had passed. The photographer, disappointed, lowered his camera. Julian turned back to the crowd, already dismissing the brief interaction. But the phantom melody was still there, nagging at the edge of his consciousness. "Hayes, Anya Hayes." The name was common enough. And the voice. There was an echo to it, a ghost resonance he couldn't place. Clara was prattling beside him about someone's terrible choice of shoes, but Julian wasn't listening. He was watching the artist. She was being greeted by the director of the city's Museum of Modern Art, a man who had snubbed Julian at a fundraiser last month. They were shaking hands, the director's face alight with genuine admiration. "Anya." The name resonated again, louder this time. Anya. The Children's Hospital fundraiser. The quiet woman on the cream sofa. The simple bun. The beige cardigans. His blood ran cold. He looked again at the artist, who was now laughing at something the museum director had said. Her whole face transformed by the laughter, vibrant and alive. He tried to superimpose the image of his mousy, timid first wife onto this radiant, confident woman. It was impossible. They were two different people, and yet, he saw it. A tiny, almost invisible scar, just above her left eyebrow, from a childhood fall she had once told him about. The way she tilted her head when she listened intently. The specific, unique tone of dark chocolate in her eyes, now glittering with life under the chandeliers. The whiskey he had drunk earlier churned in his stomach. The air in the opulent ballroom suddenly felt dense, suffocating. He turned to Clara, his face pale. "What is it, darling?" she asked, her smile faltering at his expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Julian's gaze was fixed on the woman across the room. The artist, the stranger, the woman he had completely ignored. The woman he had praised like a servant. The woman who was impossible, undeniable. His first wife. "I think I have," he whispered, the full weight of his colossal mistake beginning to crash down upon him. It was too late. The encounter had happened. The dismissal was complete, and the woman he hadn't recognized was now the most captivating person in the room. What did you feel in this moment? Surprise? Satisfaction? Or maybe a little pity for Julian? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 5. Checkmate. The realization did not hit Julian like a lightning bolt. It was more like the slow, sickening creep of an icy tide. One moment, he was Julian Sterling, master of the universe, standing at the pinnacle of his own glittering event. The next, he was a man staring into an abyss of his own making. "That's not possible," he breathed, more to himself than to Clara. "What's not possible?" Clara demanded, her voice sharp with irritation. "Julian, what is wrong with you?" He couldn't answer. His mind was a frantic jumble of disjointed images. The quiet, submissive woman leaving his apartment with a small suitcase, and the radiant, self-possessed artist presiding over her magnificent sculpture. The two realities refused to merge. How could the drab, colorless caterpillar he discarded have transformed into this butterfly? And not just any butterfly, but one with wings of steel. He watched as the city's mayor, a man he had been trying to meet with for months, walked up to Anya, shaking her hand with genuine enthusiasm. The chairman of the board of the city's largest bank joined the conversation, laughing at something she said. She was no longer at the margins of this world. She was its center of gravity. "I need a drink," Julian mumbled, pushing past a bewildered Clara and heading for the bar. He ordered a straight whiskey and downed it in one burning gulp. The alcohol did nothing to steady his nerves. It only sharpened the edges of his panic. He had scorned her. He had looked into the eyes of the woman who shared his bed for a decade and patronized her. A wonderful piece. Well done. The memory of his own pompous, condescending words churned his stomach. He hadn't just failed to recognize her. He had insulted her on the biggest stage possible, in front of everyone who mattered. Meanwhile, Clara's finely tuned social radar was screaming. She had seen the look on Julian's face. This wasn't about a bad deal or a market fluctuation. This was personal. Her eyes darted to the artist, Anya Hayes. Who was she? The name felt vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Clara's world was designed to exclude anyone or anything that didn't directly benefit her. And a mousy first wife was definitely not on the list. She intercepted one of the junior gala committee members, a young woman named Sophia. "The artist," Clara said, feigning casual interest. "Anya Hayes. What's her story?" Sophia's eyes lit up. "Oh, she's incredible. A total genius. She came out of nowhere a few years ago. Her gallery, Hayes Studios, is one of the hottest in the country. They say she turned down a commission from a sheik in Dubai to do this piece for us. Can you believe it? We're so lucky to have her." Sophia leaned in conspiratorially. "And between us, Mr. Sterling got her at a bargain price. Her usual fee for a work this size is almost double what the committee approved. Clara's painted smile felt fragile enough to crack. This woman was not only a success, but she was a bargain Julian had stumbled upon. The idea was infuriating. She thanked Sophia and slid back to Julian's side at the bar. "So the artist is apparently a big deal," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Funny I don't remember you ever mentioning her." Julian's knuckles were white as he held his empty glass. "Her name? I didn't register it. The committee handled it." "The committee?" Clara's voice was laced with disbelief. "Julian, you approve every budget line item. You knew exactly who you were hiring." She stopped, a dreadful suspicion dawning. She remembered fragments of conversations from years ago. Julian complaining about his divorce. A name. A quiet, artistic woman. Anya. Her blood ran cold. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes wide with horror as she looked from Julian's ashen face to the woman across the room. "That's her, isn't it? That's your first wife?" The question hung between them, ugly and undeniable. It wasn't just that Julian had failed to recognize his ex-wife. It was that the woman he had replaced her with, the woman who had helped him discard her, had been so spectacularly outshone. Clara, in her glittering, expensive gown, suddenly felt cheap. Her beauty was bought and paid for, a curated accessory. Anya's radiance was earned, a light that shone from within. The consequences started almost immediately, though subtly at first. The story of the brief, scornful encounter began to circulate. It was too delicious to ignore. Julian Sterling, the man who prided himself on knowing everyone and everything, had scorned the host of his own party. The initial whispers were about his arrogance, but then someone connected the dots. A senior board member with a good memory recalled the first Mrs. Sterling, that quiet girl who used to attend these things on Julian's arm. The story mutated, becoming infinitely more scandalous. He hadn't just scorned the artist. He had scorned his own ex-wife, the woman he cast aside, and hadn't even recognized her. The atmosphere in the room changed. The looks directed at Julian were no longer just admiring. They were speculative, laced with a delicious dose of schadenfreude. People looked at Julian and Clara with their tight, frozen smiles, and at Anya, who looked completely oblivious, calmly discussing her work with a circle of admirers. The contrast was devastating. He was the past, loud and brutal. She was the future, elegant and serene. Julian felt the power shift like a change in atmospheric pressure. He tried to recover, to work the room, but his arrogance was gone. His jokes fell flat. His handshake felt less like a power move and more like a desperate plea. He saw people whispering behind his back as he approached. He had become a caricature, a laughingstock at his own party. For Clara, it was a waking nightmare. Her entire identity was based on being Mrs. Julian Sterling, the glamorous, envied woman who had won. But tonight, she was a cosmic loser. She saw the pitying glances from the other women, the smug smiles. They all thought the same thing. He left his wife for you, and his wife came back as a queen. Her diamond necklace suddenly felt like a heavy, vulgar chain. The final crushing blow came during the live auction. The final item was a private commission by the artist herself, Anya Hayes. When the auctioneer announced the lot, a wave of excited murmurs went through the crowd. The bidding was fierce, quickly climbing into the six figures. Julian, in a desperate, misguided attempt to regain control, to prove something, he wasn't even sure what, entered the bidding. $200,000, his voice boomed, a little too loudly. Silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to him, then to Anya, who was standing near the stage. She registered his bid with a flicker of expression. Was it surprise? Amusement? It was impossible to tell. Her face was a mask of polite neutrality. Another bidder immediately countered. 225,000. 250,000, Julian retorted, his face flushed. Clara grabbed his arm. Julian, stop, she hissed. What are you doing? He shook her off. This was more than a painting. This was about reclaiming his narrative. He would own a piece of her success. He would force her to deal with him. The price climbed. $300,000. $350,000. Julian was bidding against a rival tech billionaire, a man he despised. It became a testosterone-fueled war of egos playing out in front of the city's elite. $500,000, Julian shouted, his voice slightly cracking. The room gasped. The auctioneer looked at Anya. She made a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Then she stepped forward and took the microphone. Thank you all for your incredible generosity. Her quiet voice resonated through the silenced ballroom. And thank you, Mr. Sterling, for your enthusiastic bidding. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. However, I must respectfully withdraw this item from the auction. The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. Anya held up a hand for silence. Hayes Studios has a policy, she continued, her gaze sweeping coldly over the stunned audience before settling for a brief, devastating moment on Julian. We do not take private commissions solicited through a public spectacle. My art is not a trophy to be won in a bidding war. She smiled, a serene, unshakable smile. Instead, I will donate a new, original piece directly to the Children's Hospital. Thank you. She handed the microphone back to the stunned auctioneer, and with one final, elegant nod to the crowd, she turned and walked off the stage. She did not look back at Julian. She didn't have to. The humiliation was absolute. She had not only rejected his money, she had rejected his entire world, his values, his power games. In one calm, elegant move, she had utterly checkmated him, exposing his desperate bid for what it was, a pathetic, vulgar display. The consequences were no longer just whispers and gossip. It was a mushroom cloud, and Julian and Clara were at ground zero. What did you think of that unexpected twist? Was that the perfect way for Anya to prove her power? Share your opinion in the comments section. Chapter 6. The aftermath. The days following the Starlight Gala were a masterclass in social and professional implosion for Julian and Clara Sterling. The story of the encounter became the city's favorite piece of gossip, retold with increasing embellishment at every charity luncheon and country club dinner. It had all the elements of a perfect scandal: arrogance, beauty, vengeance, and a fall from grace. Julian was not just the man who failed to recognize his ex-wife. He was the fool who tried to buy her at a public auction and was annihilated with gentle but firm precision. The narrative had been snatched from him, and he was now merely a character in Anya Hayes' epic rise. His phone, usually a ceaseless source of validation, grew eerily silent. The first concrete sign of the turning tide came 3 days after the gala. Julian was trying to close a major real estate deal, a partnership with a contemporary named Marcus Thorne. The final call should have been a formality. Instead, Marcus was evasive. The board is getting cold feet, Julian, Marcus said, his voice stripped of its usual camaraderie. Cold feet? Marcus, the numbers are solid. This is a guaranteed win. There was a pause. It's not about the numbers anymore, Julian. It's about the image. The gala was all anyone talked about at the club this weekend. My partners feel your personal brand is a little volatile right now. My personal brand? Julian sneered. The words tasted like venom. What does that have to do with a real estate firm? It has everything to do with it, Marcus said, his tone now sharp and final. We're pulling out. I'm sorry. The line cut off. Julian stared at his phone, a vein throbbing in his temple. He had been fired, weighed, measured, and found wanting. Soon after, his own charitable foundation board members called an emergency meeting to discuss reputational damage. His power, which he had always believed was forged in his own brilliance, was revealed to be a fragile construction, held up by the perception of others. And that perception had been shattered. For Clara, the reckoning was more personal and perhaps crueler. Her world was built on social currency, and her stock had plummeted to zero. She forced herself to attend a ballet luncheon, determined to face the whispers. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. She was seated not at the head table, but at a marginal one near the kitchens. The women who had once fawned over her now offered tight, pitying smiles. Genevieve Astor, a woman whose social standing Clara had always envied and sought to usurp, slid up to her table. "Clara, darling," Genevieve cooed, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I saw the photos from the gala. Such a dramatic evening. And your husband's first wife. What a talent. It just goes to show you never know who has hidden depths." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. Clara was no longer the winner. She was the consolation prize, a footnote in the incredible story of Anya's ascent. Her magnificent diamond necklace suddenly felt like a heavy, vulgar chain. Their opulent penthouse, once a symbol of their success, became a gilded cage. The silence that had once been Anya's torment now belonged to them. They circled each other in the vast, sterile rooms, the air thick with unspoken accusations. One evening, Julian slammed a copy of a lifestyle magazine onto the marble kitchen counter. The cover story was a 10-page feature on Anya Hayes, titled "The Phoenix of the Art World." It was filled with stunning photos of her work, her gallery, and Anya herself, looking serene and powerful. "Look at this," he snarled, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "They call her a phoenix. What does that make me?" "The fire." Clara, who had been nursing a glass of wine, looked up with dead eyes. "It makes you the fool who let a phoenix fly away so he could keep a parrot." The insult, so direct and vicious, hung between them. "A parrot?" Julian bellowed. "I gave you everything. You were a glorified event planner before you met me. And you were married to a masterpiece you were too blind to see," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You didn't just ruin yourself, Julian. You ruined me." Clara blamed Julian for her stunning arrogance. Julian, in the dark, twisted logic of a narcissist, blamed Clara for not being enough, for somehow allowing Anya to so completely overshadow her. 2 weeks after the gala, Julian finally broke. Driven by a desperate, toxic cocktail of wounded pride, simmering anger, and a strange, uncharacteristic yearning, he did the one thing his lawyers would have screamed at him not to do. He went to Anya's gallery. Hayes Studios looked nothing like the stuffy, intimidating galleries of his world. It was a bright, airy space with polished concrete floors and high ceilings flooded with natural light. The art on the walls was vibrant and alive. And in the back of the gallery, in a glass-walled office, was Anya. She wasn't painting. She was on a video conference with a man on a large screen, and even from a distance, Julian could see the reverence in the man's expression. Anya was laughing, a full, genuine laugh that faintly echoed through the gallery, looking relaxed, powerful, and completely in control. She saw him approach through the glass. Her smile did not falter. She calmly raised a finger, signaling him to wait. She finished her point with the man on the screen and said, "Talk soon, Thomas." She clicked the screen off. Then she looked at him. Her expression was placid, as if he were a mildly interesting stranger who had wandered in off the street. "Julian," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a simple statement of fact. Her voice was even, betraying no emotion, To what do I owe the pleasure? He stood awkwardly in her office doorway. The power dynamic of their entire marriage reversed. Here he was, the supplicant. She was the one in charge. Anya, we need to talk, he began. His voice was husky. Do we? She asked, leaning back in her chair. I feel we said everything we needed to say 10 years ago, and then again 5 years ago, and then again, I suppose 2 weeks ago at the gala. The casual, cutting precision of her words stung. That night, you didn't recognize me, she finished for him. A slight, knowing smile touched her lips. I know, it was quite obvious. In a way, I should thank you. It was the most honest moment our relationship had in over a decade. The lack of anger in her voice was more unnerving than any tirade. He had come prepared for a fight, for tears, for a dramatic confrontation. He was not prepared for this serene, untouchable calm. I don't understand how this happened, he said, vaguely gesturing toward the gallery, at her, at the entire impossible situation. The woman I knew was quiet. She was simple. She never would have been able to do all this. For the first time, a flash of something, not anger, but a deep, felt sadness, crossed Anya's face. The woman you knew, she said softly, was a person you never bothered to see. You saw a reflection of what you wanted, a quiet, convenient accessory. You did not see the artist, the dreamer, the person with her own hopes and passions. You didn't water the plant, Julian, and then you were surprised when it didn't bloom in your shadow. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling street. You didn't break me, you know. You simply erased me, and in doing so, you gave me the most incredible gift. You gave me a blank canvas. I got to paint myself back into existence with my own colors. My way. Julian's desperation mounted. This was not going how he planned. I want to fix this, he said. The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I miss you. Anya turned from the window and laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was a sound of genuine, immaculate disbelief. Oh, Julian, she said, shaking her head. No, you don't miss me. You don't even know me. You miss the idea of me. You miss the comfort, the silence, the woman who made your life easy so you could pursue your ambitions and your affairs without interruption. And now you miss what I have. You see my success, the admiration of others, and you want to own it. Just like you tried to own my art at the auction. You haven't changed at all. It was at that precise moment that the gallery's front door opened, and Clara walked in. She looked terrible. Her expensive clothes hung off her like a stranger's, and her face was a mask of tense anxiety. She saw Julian, and her face hardened. I knew it! She spat. Her voice trembled with rage. I knew you would come crawling back here. Anya looked from Julian's stunned face to Clara's furious one. She sighed, the sigh of a woman dealing with tedious, predictable drama. This, Anya said, gesturing between the two of them, has absolutely nothing to do with me. Not anymore. She walked toward her desk, picked up her purse, and slung it over her shoulder. I have a lunch meeting at the MoMA with the Tate curator. She let that detail settle, a final, effortless confirmation of the world she now inhabited. Ben can help you if you are interested in purchasing a piece. She paused and looked directly at Clara, her gaze not cruel, but piercingly clear. And for what it's worth, he's your problem now. You built your house on stolen ground. You can't be surprised if you have shaky foundations. She walked past them, out of her office, and headed for the front of the gallery. She stopped at the doorway and looked back at the two figures standing motionless amidst the beautiful art, born of her pain. They looked small and ugly in the bright, clean space. Goodbye, Julian, she said. And the finality in her voice was absolute. It was the closing of a book, the switching off of a light, the final, silent dropping of a curtain. Then she turned and walked out into the sunlight, leaving them behind in the beautiful, resonating gallery, trapped forever in the glare of a woman they had failed to see until it was too late. They had their money, their penthouse, and their misery. Anya had herself, and finally, truly, she had won. Final reflection, the true measure of value. And there you have it, a story of how the deepest betrayals can forge the most incredible strength. Anya's journey was not just a physical transformation. It was about the reclamation of her soul. She shows us that your value is never determined by another person's inability to see your worth. Julian and Clara were left with the empty shell of their choices, while Anya built an empire from the ashes they left behind. What did you think of her epic comeback? Who was the real villain in this story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of real-life drama and powerful transformations, be sure to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable stories. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss an update. Thanks for watching.